train now stopped in its tracks. Court says ECA of Lamu plant was illegal and orders it to be scrapped. Lamu coal train now stopped in its track. Court says ECA of Lamu plant was illegal and orders it be scrapped. And we shall also be just giving you a story where there is a tender that also will be, of course, in the dailies this morning that showcases this project is going full steam ahead. Yet we have also a court order here on page 21 of the Outlook. This is the Pulled magazine inside the East African. What does it portend as well? Also, we have other international leaders talking about energy and the way we need to focus on climate change with renewable energy right now, because that can also be a source of civil unrest as well, or social unrest. This is what is headlining the front page of the East African this week. Let me try and also show you what is on the front page of... I'm trying to pick up now, see if I can actually get the East African, but the People Daily for you this morning. I'll not give it because I know actually we have it here. But if it eludes me, we shall just continue with the discussion. But let me show you what is on the front page of the Wall Street Journal finally. Flash floods swarm streets in nation's capital. This is motorists who are sitting here stranded on a flooded section of Canal Road in Washington, D.C. during a heavy rainstorm on Monday. The National Weather Service issued a flash flood emergency that affected more than 1.5 million people, all residents in the district and Virginia as well. You can follow the story on page 3 of the Wall Street Journal. Epstein accused of sex trafficking, financially charged with luring girls to his homes. Defense says case is improper redo or redo. I don't know how you can pronounce that, but you can follow the story on page 2. And also, Iranians threaten to extend nuclear breaches. Tehran seeks relief from U.S. economic sanctions as it speeds uranium enrichment. Iran warned it will take further steps to breach the 2015 nuclear accord in early September if it doesn't receive long-sought relief from U.S. economic sanctions as it began enriching uranium above limits set out in the deal. That is what we have, a sidebar story also on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Let's see what we have as editorial cartoons this morning. This is what we have inside the Standard this morning. Of course, he's paying tribute to Joe Kadenge, who passed on over the weekend. Joe Kadenge, 1935-2019, priceless. And of course, that is a stamp there, which is priceless. Of course, paying tribute to the legendary Joe Kadenge. Let's move on and see what also Victor has drawn for us inside the Daily Nation and also Stano. This is what we have inside the People Daily today. Where will I get the money to give them? I want a job, roads, school fees, poverty, water, maternity bill, widows and orphans, funeral, medical appeal. Welcome to your constituency, Mheshimiwa. This is what the small cat is telling the MP. Of course, this is in light of what has been on the front page of the dailies as far as their packs and salaries are concerned. And finally, Victor, this is what is drawn for us this morning. And this is about Trump. Trump is inept and incompetent, right? And of course, he is actually now fiddling through the pages of the dictionary to find out the meaning of the word inept. This is arising from, of course, the diplomatic row between UK and US right now in regard to some of the confidential, of course, information that was leaked. And this has caused a diplomatic row between US and UK right now. We'll give you the details of this much later in the course of the program. I want to show you what we have also this morning as from our archives. And this is during the Jamhuri Day. Of course, these are our police officers. This we have here is the Senior Deputy Commissioner of Police, Japheth Mwania, on the left. and he is having a quiet word with the former head of the Presidential Escort Unit, the Commandant of the General Service Unit, that is GSU, Mr. Samson Cherambos, during Jamhuri Day celebrations at the Nyayo National Stadium in Nairobi. That was in December 2000. This is from our archives, courtesy of the print library. Maybe I can show you just briefly before we wind up what also, or how the Daily Nation was looking in 1963. Today is the 10th. Well, I'm missing my copy there. I have 11th tomorrow's, but of course I will have shown you how the Daily Nation was then and what was headlining the front page of the Daily Nation then. But grab a copy of the Daily Nation this morning. Shock and fury over MP's plot for hefty packs is what is headlining the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. And State House has advertised for a tender for the supply of charcoal for the president's kitchen, which apparently uses the dirty fuel source. This is according to an advertisement set to run in today's dailies, throwing the topmost office of the heat of the scrutiny, owing to the irony that the country has pronounced itself as being focused, advancing clean energy for cooking. The further banning issue here is that there is an existing ban on logging, which was extended for another year in November 2018, as the country struggles to attain at least 10% forest cover by 2020. That is a story that you need to follow, and you can grab a copy of the dailies this morning to try and see what this advertisement is all about. But even as that is happening, we have naturalist David Attenborough, who was telling the British lawmakers on Tuesday, that is yesterday, that it will be essential to stick to a new target to decarbonize the economy, warning that failure to tackle climate change could lead to massive social unrest. Attenborough, one of the world's most influential wildlife broadcasters, said Britain's move last month to become the first G7 country to commit to a goal of net zero carbon emission by 2050 could help galvanize broader international action. Attenborough, who has become increasingly outspoken about risks posed by the climate crisis in recent years, added, quote unquote, "It's absolutely essential that it should be done if it were going to avoid a massive social unrest." And of course, he told the hearing that he drew hope from an upsurge in environmental activism by a younger generation aware that they will bear the brunt of climate impacts as the crisis worsened in coming decades. Let's just listen in to what he had to say.
I'm okay, for the next decade. I'm okay, and all of us here are okay, because we won't face the problems that are coming. But the problems in another 20, 30 years are really major problems that are going to cause great social unrest and great changes in the way that we live, in what we eat and how we live and so on. That's going to happen.
Do you think people are willing and ready to reduce the number of flights they make, for example, in order to achieve the changes that we're arguing for?
Well, they won't. I can't believe they will just be happy to say, "Oh, I don't care. I'm just going ahead." And there is a way, of course, in which those in power, as it is, influence how many people take it, and that's economically. I mean, you adjust the price to the various restrictions that you have.
Do you think the government's net zero target of 2050 represents the UK doing its fair share of limiting global warming to 1.5%?
Yes, I do. My only hope is that we don't backslide, and the hope that no other country backslides either. It's a tough target. I mean, it's not an easy statement to have made, and it's going to cost money. I mean, that's the nub of it. I mean, it's not just piety, which anybody can express pious views. It's actually a practical commitment cannot be radical enough in dealing with the issues that face us at the moment. The question is what is practically possible. How can we take the electorate with us in dealing with these things? Because it costs money in realistic terms. I mean, dealing with these problems means we've got to change our lifestyle. Dealing with the problem is going to cost internationally, it's going to cost money. And so the question is how fast can we go, is how fast can we carry the electorate with us? The most encouraging thing that I see, of course, is that the electors of tomorrow are already making that to themselves, their voices very, very clear. Well, it gives a measurement, a calibration, a target to see where we're going and what we're aiming at, which is measurable. And that's the advantage of it, because the problem we're dealing with is so pervasive that you can't just say we're winning here or we're losing there. You have to make a summation of it in some way.
The UK is still showing world leadership when it comes to tackling climate change.
I think our record has been pretty good. And actually, it has historical roots. And so it should have, because in fact, who started the problem? This country. It was the Industrial Revolution that started here.
Have given us hope as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, some of the protesters, school strikes, etc.
Yes,
has given us hope.
The idealism of youth is something. Thank you very much.
David Attenborough, there, a leading figure when it comes to issues of environment. If you're not aware about him, probably you've watched him somewhere on a National Geographic, really showcasing what the planet is all about, how it has been endowed with, of course, the flora and fauna. And that is the man behind the Planet Earth, and Blue Planet documentaries also say the environmental impact of air travel, as you had there, should be factored into ticket prices as well. But even as we're having that particular pronouncement from David Attenborough, that if we do not really take care, then this will lead to social unrest as well. Here is what also is inside the East African here, the Outlook magazine, even as State House is making that particular, or putting out that particular tender. Call in Kenya, necessary evil or expensive era. A tribunal stopped construction of 2 billion shillings coal-powered plant, that is 2 billion, not shillings, but dollar coal-powered plant in a World Heritage Site in Kenya's coastal town of Lamu. It gives all the story that we have here as well. But Professor Naomi Damba has been always telling us that the next war that is going to affect this world is going to be a war of resources. And activism, we have it right now, the activism as far as people who are really against the coal in this country. But we can see the government speaking from both sides of the mouth as far as this is concerned. Let's just hear from you, Naomi Damba.
Debarl, first of all, I'm so pleased to be back with my team.
Welcome.
And everybody look alive. And you too, Debarl. We just spent 1 week over in the mountain of Rwanda with the Inter-University Council of East Africa, talking about the 4th Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
Which is going to be driven by artificial intelligence. And this has a serious implication on what we do. It has serious implication on the jobs. It has serious implication in how we conduct our day-to-day life. It has serious implication of our future. The coal, as Attenborough indicated, or Vice President Al Gore, who had been very active in this field, was started by Industrial Revolution and polluting the environment without thinking for anything else but for the common good. There was no other mechanism to control the pollution at that time. At this time we are sitting, we have a way to control pollution. And so we need to produce cheap energy. There is no question about it. We need to to use our own resources in Kenya. And so just stopping is not the answer, but finding a clever and a scientific way to produce it in other ways that it will not have significant impact to others. That's what we need to be doing, and their mechanism of doing it right now.
Right. Let's hear from Ambassador Esses Munche.
Good morning, Debarl and my fellow panelists. This is one of the most, important aspects of our life that may be tucked away, and people hoping that time will resolve it, but we are actually running out of time. Just to give you quick statistics, if you look at globally now, the North Pole and South Pole, all that ice is melting. Look at the big Amazon forest and the Congo forest, they are all depleting. And you have seen the climate rise. I was in Europe just only last month, where you saw temperatures going beyond 40. And all this drought that we are facing here, time in and time out. I mean, this is not July, as I know it, you can tell. So time is running out, but I think I want to build on what the Prof has said, that the question is not to press a panic mode and go left and right without, approaching it in a systematic way. What are the systematic issues? We must continue to have energy. And the question is, what is the cost of energy? Do we have that available energy? There are now renewable sources of energy, solar, wind, geothermal, and the rest, that can be harnessed to mitigate against the climate change, instead of destroying our forest and ecosystems as a whole. But even as we do so, it must be a global partnership. If you have some countries now, if the industrialized countries saying there's nothing like climate change caused by, the consumption rate that the world is engaged in, then we're sending mixed signals. And so if we are not going to have that partnership, because if you refuse to be part of that climate change, and yet you see that the effect is here with us, it means there is no global architecture for us to approach this thing. The Paris Climate Accord, some have said, threat it, we're not going to be part of it. And so, but for our own part, let us do the little we can so that we can conserve. I mean, you go now to villages, there's no water. You see, people, communities fighting, grasslands. This thing is here. But the thing is, let us approach it so that we can start it, looking at it from our own point of little ecosystem, but globally, if we are going to confront this big threat to humanity.
Right. Could you weigh in also on the issue of a double speak from the government? And of course, also we had this particular pronouncement or judgment from the courts as well, but they're going full steam ahead to have this particular tender on call.
I saw it in the news.
Yes.
And to me, it was a big surprise to see that we can still talk about using charcoal. I don't know what the system is like and what quantities we are talking about. But if it is one that you can put on a tender, I want to believe that there is something that I've not understood. And I don't want to comment on something I've not understood. The moment I get to know the facts, I'll be able to comment properly. Right. But it is surprising that at this day and age, even in my little house, now when I have to think of having a charcoal, we were getting into a situation you cannot buy charcoal on the road. How come that we can now say, let us encourage charcoal usage? Sure. Unless you are talking of coal. If it is coal, I will take a different position.
All right, let's hear from Dr. Hassan Kanete.
Yeah, it is interesting. Now, personally, I don't have complete information to make a comment on that because, the whole thing sounds preposterous, frankly speaking. So I'm not going to treat it with lots of credibility until I have all the information at hand to know exactly what context, because sometimes we pick a little snippet of something and then we run with it, and it might not be representative of what is happening. Now, the gentleman at Attenborough suggesting that social unrest is likely to be caused by climate change is not preposterous. In fact, it's already happening. including our own region. Some of the conflicts we're facing, especially in arid and pastoral areas, are actually as a result of climate change. And people are no longer seeing the rains. We've completely depleted our forest cover. And it's not just, of course, Kenya, a number of countries, but I think we have a unique role to play in that. Now, there's a delicate balance sometimes between development and conservation. And this an argument has been going on for a while. It's still the argument that Republicans in the US are trying to make. Say, are we going to wait for 50 years, or should we just exploit coal now and then we get rich? Personally, a personal position has always been there's no justification for polluting environment. There's no justification for destroying a country or the natural ecosystem, because that is, we're destroying ourselves. Kenya has one of the largest geothermal potentials, actually, of any country around. And I think is among the top 15, if not the top 10 in the world in terms of geothermal production, or at least that potential. If whoever is investing the $2 billion, that's 200 billion shillings in coal, if they were to invest that in geothermal or wind or solar in this country, it's going to be much cleaner, much more sustainable. And I think as a nation, we have to talk honestly and discuss this in a serious way. And of course, someone would say it's going to bring development here. It's not, coal is not just available in Lamu. It's available in places in Ukambani and stuff like that in large quantities. And of course, there are people who are trying to push that agenda with regard to we need to do it now because we can't wait to grow. But that is like death in small doses. So are we going to be comfortable that, well, I'm happier, if I don't have to worry about the next generation, but just today? We also have to worry about the next generation as a country. And it is something, and if this something has been considered, I think it should be reconsidered, because it is a very, very highly polluting thing. Now, Ambassador mentioned that some industrial countries, saying there's nothing like climate change. Climate change is a fact. And I'm sure the ambassador also knows that, and I'm sure he's referring to the United States under Donald Trump. Yeah, now Donald Trump is a passing cloud. He's a misnomer in international relations, and I believe in a few years he'll probably not be in office, because there is a large consensus within the scientific community that climate change is not an opinion, it's a fact, it's scientific, it's happening. As you say, the ice up there is melting, you understand? The bears don't even have any place to stay anymore. And so I think as a country that hosts the United Nations Developmental Program, we should actually take the lead and not be soon to be going the other way around. We should take the lead in this, and even though we are small, we can still bite, but bite in a positive way.
Right. Dr. Mumuzao.
Yeah, thank you, Debarl. The whole debate and the dynamics around it present different facets, and different actors pull in different directions around it. The onus on the entire problem is placed on the doorsteps of few countries that actually are responsible for the highest percentage of emission of chlorofluorocarbons and other greenhouse gases and so on, which are harmful to to the environment and of course the ozone layer and so on. So countries have really got to engage with a lot of sobriety. There have been suggestions, for example, that the more developed, highly industrialized countries around the world can invest to conserve the environment in other parts where those other countries or other societies are more or less underdeveloped or poorer, but they can invest in, conservation itself can be an industry. And they talked about carbon trading, for example. And the World Bank has invested in a multi-billion project where countries are being encouraged to, for example, invest in planting trees like bamboo forest and so on. There is one, I think, in Taita Taveta right now, which is working out. So we need very practical solutions, because even as we talk, there is a lot in the consumer society that beckons for for you know for solutions, and people need these products, but at the same time they need energy, they need all this. But well, world resources are not they are finite. They can end. Water, you know, and all other resources have a limit, even oil and so on.
Yes.
So people really have got to reason, because the point will reach where most of these things will not be sustainable, and therefore the whole argument that started with Rio and you know the Agenda 2021 and the argument of the sustainable development. Now we are talking almost 30-something Rio plus, and all these are very important arguments. But there is need for well-structured, well-directed dialogue, because it need not be confrontational, and we cannot just let one country to take leadership. It has to be a whole collective, collegial affair. So that's the way to look at it, and we need to have more practical solutions around the whole thing. A lot of countries need a lot of change in their culture, for example. Even just out here, you find people littering, and all this ends up in our water system, and our rivers are polluted. So we really have got to think in a well-rounded manner. If you tell people, I have the money here, and you can invest in trees and so on, a lot of countries can make the difference. So that is what the developed countries around the world, the G20, need to invest in, because we have the space. We can supply fresh air to the world, given a chance.
Okay, thank you. Unless you've got anything else you want to add to that?
Just a quick addition to that. I think building on what Dr. Nsao said, that the global resources are finite, and that we must watch our consumption, the rate of consumption. There are two things which are sticking out today. If we continue with the kind of trend of consumption today, statistics show that we need 3 Earth-sized planets to be able to sustain our life. In other words, we need Earth like this 3 times to sustain the trend of our consumption. That is worrying. And that is on the global aspect. And at the moment, if you look at the world, if you think of our 2 lungs on which we breathe, it is Africa and South America that are propping that. But unless Africa, and this is, I think, the point Dr. Kaneji was talking about, is not supported to change the style, because if you argue that we must now change into a low carbon or a green economy, it is costly. We need that technology, and we don't have the resources for that. If the rest of the world must then say, we are in it together and supporting those resources. One final point. I think let's not take this as a simple issue, because it is starting to affect us. You have seen this carbon tax that even France has put now on aeroplanes.
Yes.
And you can see the shares plunging. But it's, you might ask yourself, how is it going to bite you? I was in Europe this last month, and I found that in some of the supermarkets, when people walk in and they say our green beans, they don't buy it. They say, why? Because the carbon print is too big. They are not buying any product that has a huge carbon print. And so it is starting to affect us, that even the products we sell abroad will not be bought because people will say it has traveled on air a long distance. So it is here. And that means we must change, because the farmers who grow these green beans will have to sell it in the nearby market where the carbon print is not that low.
Thank you. Naomi Damba.
The point I want to put across to all Kenyans is that every single one of us has a role and a major role to play. Whether it's just planting one tree, whether it is Wangari Maathai who took a role, and now we have a beautiful Karura forest, a place where we can walk. Do not use plastic. Do not go across to Uganda and bring plastic into Kenya. That's our major contribution toward what we're talking about. It is real. Everyone's going to feel it, and we all have to save this country and the world.
Right, thank you. Right, we wanted to continue with our discussion also and look at what is happening in Mother's Academia as well, where the Ministry of Education and Teachers Service Commission officials held a closed-door meeting with the management of Nairobi School after claims of assault and bullying rocked the school. The story of a 15-year-old Form 2 student at the school alleged to have been assaulted brutally by school prefects to the extent of suffering brain damage kicked off a storm. His parents say they received a call from school last week informing them that their son was unwell and they should pick him up. His mother shared her frustration in a WhatsApp group and composed of parents with students at the school. A Facebook user blew the whistle on the plight of a student, sparking a heated online conversation. The student will undergo a brain surgery as a medical examination conducted on him revealed fluid in the brain. Both the school and the ministry are yet to issue a statement on the alleged incident, which is also under police investigation. And of course, this is drawing a conversation about our children in school and their security. And we know bullying is still rife in our schools as well. This is just one of the incidents, and we have many untold incidences also in school. Maybe we can just throw it to our panelists as well on this particular matter and join this particular story with what is headlining the front page of the Star this morning. I'll be able to show you that much later in the course of the program. And also what was on the front page of the Standard on Monday as well. I'll pick up that and show you what we have as new developments as far as the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development Amendment Bill is concerned, where they're seeking to actually teach children on counter-terrorism, but they've not indicated at what level of class that will begin as well. So we shall be discussing that also with our panelists. But let's just weigh in on what really happened in Nairobi School and bullying in schools as well. We can actually begin with you, Dr. Hassan Khanenje. Very sad incident here.
Yeah, extremely sad. I think this is something that has to be approached with in a way that is very purposeful and very deliberate. I think during my time, bullying, especially for freshmen, was called monolization. Mm-hmm. And if you are Form 1, you are a mono. And it was seen as a rite of passage. And the truth is, a lot of increasing incidents of even teen suicide is coming from bullying. Mm-hmm. You have children who dropped out of school who are brilliant because they've been bullied out of school. And this case just illustrates the degree to which this causes in terms of damage, in terms of preventing students from being able to concentrate in school. Mm-hmm. How do you think about a parent who's taken their son or daughter to school only to realize that my daughter or my son is no longer able to continue with school because has been bullied, and not just that, they've been hurt, and sometimes irreparably. Mm-hmm. Because if it's brain damage, that is something very serious, may affect him for the rest of his life. And we know that certain things have been banned from school, but I think what was coming from the school administration, what has not been addressed sufficiently is the kind of relationship that students engage in. And of course, that is the work of school administration. But I think there also has to be some policy in case a school fails to rein in their errant students, what should be done to it? Because we cannot just allow this to happen. And we know that a lot of school administrations will not want to admit that this is going on in their school, because that speaks to their, at least, failure or lack of action. And it is something we have to debate. It's going on in lots of schools up to today. And I'm sure if some study was done and asked some Form 1s, they're going to tell you, not just Form 1s, even some of them are Form 2, Form 3s. Mm-hmm. Yes. And not just in high school. It's also happening in primary school. Mm-hmm. So it's a debate I think we should talk about, but for this particular case, they should follow up to it, and I think law has to take its course to know exactly what happened, and action has to be taken, and has to be severe against those students who were involved in this. They should, I think, face disciplinary action, if not completely expelled from school, as a lesson of what not to do.
All right, having, of course, fluid in the brain, it seems that the beatings was very severe, or this bullying that was really perpetrated on the student was very savage. Dr. Momonzao.
Yeah, well, we cannot, sort of overreact to the situation. These are children, but what we need to invest in is more management and trying to convince them that sometimes things that look like games or just things to make fun about can get them hurt in the process. Of course, some of them are, sort of, you may call them also people advancing into young adulthood, and they should be able to internalize some of these things that they are told to do, and so on. And it would not be very fair to sort of cast aspersions or blame school administration and so on, because it's about management of fairly young people and so on. And what is important is to continue ingraining discipline, good manners, good behavior among our children, and to show them the importance of trying to be gentle with each other. So it's a very contextual issue. Like Dr. Kanejo was saying earlier, those years, it was sort of institutional. It was something that was, not looked at very seriously. But children would get hurt because others would make the habit of bullying them around. In 1992, in a girls' school in Meru, the boys, in a mixed school, the boys threatened the girls, and they went into a room and many of them suffocated. And the head of state arrived there. It was a very sad day. And the head of state reacted and said, just to make sure that those children come back, he said, shoot at on sight. and so the parents brought them to the police stations immediately. The school was called St. Kizito. And then from there, the whole process of handling the thing started off, and so on. And the head of state was not saying it he just reacted, but it was handled well. And none of those children was hurt. So we need to be cautious how to address it, but to the children out there, to the high school children in boarding schools, you need to be gentle with each other. You have to treat the other colleague as a brother, as a sister. And that is very important as we go. It's unfortunate that some of these things happen, but we have to keep working to convince the young people and hoping they don't happen. Sometimes they hurt each other even in games intentionally, and so on. So all these are contextual matters that we must continue to address.
All right. Okay, we want to take a short break right now. Of course, when we circle back, we continue with our discussion, looking at a lot of issues as well as far as security in school is concerned. We should also look at what is on the front page of the Star this morning. Pupils to be taught to detect bombs. This is a bill that is actually headed for its second reading right now, that is sponsored or is being pushed by the women rep of Turkana, that is Joyce Emani Kaur. So this is the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development Amendment Bill 2019 that is seeking to actually have students or pupils being taught on how they can detect bombs as well. So this is our discussion that we shall be having on the other side of a break. Also, you should see what was on the front page of the Standard yesterday. Why MPs want spies in schools. So this is a radical proposal there following chaos in secondary schools in recent years. A parliamentary committee wants undercover agents to gather information on students and point out the bad elements. And this story also was tucked away yesterday on page 6 of the Standard. We have parliamentary report saying this, just briefly, that students' unrest pose a serious threat to the educational system and the nation. They result in destruction of properties, loss of learning time, and psychological effects to staff and students. And of course, also numbers were given there. Number of schools affected across the country in 2018 was 107. So after issues, we shall be discussing that. Also, remember on Friday, the president signed various statutory amendment bills into law, one of which was also the Prevention of Terrorism Act that we shall also be teasing out with the panelists on the other side of the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Standing on Guard here on AM Live, where we keep an eye on the enemy. And you shall see what is on the front page of the Star this morning. This is pupils to be taught to detect bombs. Proposed law is due for second reading in the National Assembly and enjoys broad support. This is the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development Amendment Development Bill 2019, sponsored by Joyce Emani Kaur, who is a Turkana women rep. And this poses a lot of questions as far as also security is concerned. What level also of pupils are they seeking to actually be teaching this? And on the front page of the Star there, it reads that it won't be just maths, Kiswahili and science anymore. Schools will be or will soon be compelled to teach learners about anti-terrorism, how to detect explosives and react in case of an attack. If a bill in Parliament is passed, the bill introduced by Turkana Women Rep, that is Joyce Emani Kaur, seeks to reduce risks or risk posed by bombs, especially improvised explosive devices. These are bombs constructed and deployed in unconventional ways, frequently as roadside bombs. Also, just wait a minute, I'll show you also what is on the front page of the Standard as well. This is what was there, not today, but yesterday. Let me try and just lift that quickly for you. Also, why MPs want spies in schools, right? And this is a radical proposal, as I read earlier on, before we took a short break. Following chaos in secondary schools in recent years, a parliamentary committee wants undercover agents to gather information on students and point out the bad elements. This story continues on page 6 of the Standard this morning. And we just want to hear from our panelists on these new developments that we have so far. Remember, the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Amendment Bill 2019 is on its second reading. And of course, as we've read, it's got a very broad support from the floor of the House. And what will this portend also for our students who will be having, spies amongst them, just to make sure that they're secure as well? I don't know. Let's hear from Ambassador Erastus Mwencha.
This is a very interesting bill. And of course, as you said, the devil is in the details. But to me, this is a manifestation of something that is wrong in society. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that what we are trying to do is the right thing. I mean, it is patching, you say there is a broken wall here, let's close it so that the animals don't run out of the stable. And we have forgotten the whole idea of why is this happening. Mm-hmm. And unless we go to the root cause, it will be all right, but it might bring another problem. Because as my two previous panelists said before, pooling in schools, I mean, during our time, it was there as a passage, right passage, mm-hmm. But it was understood. Many of us, by the time you go to secondary school, you have not been so much contaminated. The first time I watched a film was in Form 1, which was brought to the school where I was. I had not seen all this. But now you have kids who have been exposed to so much violence. Mm-hmm. As they grow up, they have these gadgets which they use and they can surf. They watch these films. And for them, that has become part of the culture. And as somebody was saying on this platform, I think the other day, as parents, we have outsourced our responsibilities. So kids are growing with different values. And I think we need to approach the entire education system. And also the question of security, our security different. Mm-hmm. That security is not be seen as an external force to us. We should be participatory, which is okay. But that participatory, we should also be part of making that architecture. If we do properly, I mean that aspect, that the kids, when they go to school, they are taught values. Mm-hmm. They are ingrained in, neighbor yes. care. Mm-hmm. They will have a different sense. Mm-hmm. But if it is because you want to bring in this external force to come and watch them, I mean, how much are you going to watch me 24 hours to know what I do? Because people plan in their rooms. They can be in small cells and you have seen all these fires. Do you think that they sit 15, 20 of them and plan? Mm-hmm. It could be one individual. But let's look at the whole architecture.
Right.
And instead of just simply one small bit.
Right. Let's say from Noah Midama, this can be quite unnerving for the students, knowing that, of course, we have a spy around. We don't know who it is, or it could be one of us. I don't know. Let's say from Noah Midama.
About this past week, we have several articles which was written by Fritz de Souza regarding Tom Mboya, our former famous minister. But one of the things I picked out there is don't wait until you have your back to the wall in order to react. What Ambassador alluding to is real. We have neglected our responsibility as parents because we used to have a child which is surrounded by loving uncles, sisters, brothers, everyone, parents watching over this child. And Hillary Clinton has written a book talking about our own story, our own African story. And my children in America go to school with the Jewish kids. And every single week we have parents-teachers meeting. We have psychologists watching over the same child. The same child is watched by so many people that any move or anything that the child does is reported. Here's another thing, Debarl. I sit on the African Mental Health Foundation. We have over 4 million Kenyans who are suffering because of mental health. Some as young as a little child who is going to school, who's been neglected by parents who are middle class and who have no time for this child. This child is raised by some other people, strange people in the house. This child meet different people. And their friends are only the internet. So they spend incredible time, their extra time, on the internet. And therefore, people, we don't need to bring extra policemen on campus. We don't need to bring extra people on campus. On my campus at KCA University, I have a security team which composed of a number of people, including student leaders. So I'm informed of anything that's going on, whether I'm on campus or not. Let's train the people on campus. Let's reinforce them. Let them become a family outside the family which is left. Let the information flow between the institution and the parents who need to be attentive to what this one kid can do. The battle we face, we talk about terrorism. Terrorism is taking a different meaning altogether. It's going to be artificial driven. It's not going to be people carrying guns who can do so much destructive. And these children are left out with no supervision, with no control, and therefore we are reacting. This bill has no place in Kenya.
It has no place in Kenya. Let's hear from Dr. Hassan Kanenje. You think this is overplaying our hands as far as not this particular being taught, but having spies in schools? You know, not really amendment bill that we're talking about right now. This is people to be taught to detect bombs.
Well, so I don't know whether I should start with having spies in schools or whether...
Whichever that you're already on.
Yes.
Now, how will a spy in class 3 be looking like? Or class 6? Is it going to be some from outside or another class 6 pupil? As it's not practical. Now, I think because sometimes the way things are reported, and frankly speaking, might not be the way they've been conceived. And so sometimes I think it's important to do some due diligence. One thing we know, was involved in a training that was organized by the National Counter-terrorism Center of university deans and registrars for about 2 weeks. And one of the important things that was communicated here is, and that we tried also to share, is, you know, security is not a function of government alone. No. It's all of us. If we build systems within ourselves that can actually be able to do that, we're not going to need a spy, so to speak. Why? Because We value our own security. As Professor just indicated how he does it at KCA, he has teams. And students are also part of that collective security. And your personal...
So this is sort of an intelligence team, so to speak.
It's a collective.
It's a collective responsibility, and therefore you need intelligent information.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes. So, and when you hear intelligence, it's not negative. Intelligence is anything, any information that can actually assist in protecting all of us.
Correct.
Now, with regard to, training, kids how to, drills and to take bombs and stuff like that. Now, I don't know to what extent actually that bill says that, because it's being inferred that if this bill passes, then that means this is what we're going to do. No, we're not going to turn our kids into military people tomorrow. I think one of the things that's being perhaps, or rather the thinking behind it, is young people are most vulnerable to recruitment. And a lot of us have argued that part of the CVE education should be mainstreamed so we become aware of each other, of the challenges, of potential to be recruited, because it's important these young people, whether they're in higher primary or high school, all of us know what is Yellow Boys, what has been happening there for some time, and a lot of young people being recruited. We know that almost 100 of our Kenyan college students have gone to Syria. That is a fact. So mainstreaming some of these things, but not in a way that you're going to teach them how to take bombs and stuff like that, it's going to be helpful. Now, in areas a lot more susceptible, it's also important. We also have seen young people, because IEDs is one of the most troubling phenomena, actually, in this country. And it's one thing even those who are involved in CT or counterterrorism find it increasingly difficult because it's improvised. And kids can start playing with it without really knowing. They can step in it, they can take, they can, they can't recognize it. Now, in some of those areas, I think it's going to be important, for instance, to teach not just young people, everyone that, look, if you see something that looks like this, yes, please. If you're walking on the road and some place perhaps looks fresh soil and something like that, be careful. Perhaps you need to inform the police because it might be an IED down there. So I don't think, what I'm thinking, because I don't have complete information, is I think the reporters went a little bit in a hyperbole than actually it was meant for, because if we cannot turn our kids into the military. However, security has to be collective, and I think that's the essence of the bill. That's what I'm thinking.
You think this is purely hyperbole, because it says also from this it seeks the to introduce to the kids. This is sort of what they're doing in the Kenya Institute of Curricular Development, that we should have a segment where we teach this anti-terrorism, acts, how to detect a bomb, also the psychosocial support of people maybe who've gone through the trauma. Yeah. We realized what really happened at the University of Nairobi, where there was a stampede as well because of a power cable explosion. What happened also with the drill that went Ori at Strathmore as well, because the security personnel there didn't handle this particular drill expertly.
And I'll give you an example. A country such as Israel, does a lot of this thing all the time, in part because the degree of susceptibility they are with regard to what frame as terrorist attacks or that type of danger. And so if you live in that environment in an age, look at what happened, for instance, in Dusit 2 or Westgate. If we had some basic security competence training, I think a lot more people might have survived. Yeah. And it's not about what the government is doing, it's also about what are we doing, what do we know, how can we respond to it. I saw Kenyan citizens, private citizens, moving around with guns. Now, if a trained personnel from the Kenyan government or security services sees you with a gun and knows you're not part of the government, they're going to assume you are a terrorist or a gunman, and so they may take you out. So it's important we actually have this information countrywide.
All right, let's hear from Momanzao.
Yeah, thank you, Debarl. First of all, there's what we call the misuse of concepts. Word spy is not a good word. It's not in the right context. Technically, the spy is someone who conducts espionage, and that is between countries. So you cannot be a spy in your country and such things. So it's not right to say such things. But of course, within the context of maybe saying, should we have people who are following what's happening in school? The state, the government machinery has already those structures in place all over the country. But what is important is perhaps to not blow the whole thing out of proportion, like Dr. Kanenje was saying. The issue of context is very important, and I think coming from one of the representatives from Turkana and so on, we know there are places where children who are grazing just out have stumbled on unexploded ordnance, and they cannot tell what it is, and they end up losing limbs and so on, and so on. But there are a lot of operational and technical things that are not in the domain of even what would be a child at school. But what is important is selecting what is, you don't have to tell a child that that is what it is. But if you see something like this, kindly report, don't go near, and so on. Like now, people are managing Ebola in Eastern Congo and in the borders. The children have just been told, don't touch, don't greet, and wash your hands all the time when you can. And the children follow those simple instructions. And it's the only way the doctors there are trying to do. Of course, there are all manner of rebels there, and so on. So coming back to this context, it is important how the problem is not what, but how things are done. The minute you even tell people that we are teaching how to detect bombs and all that, you already create what they call a halo effect in their mind, and their psychology is changed. Sometimes it can be a double-edged sword, that that knowledge you're introducing can be misused in fact, in many cases. So there is need for a lot of prudence about how it is approached. It can be a good idea, but the issue is about how it is done. We are now talking about, for example, in the discourse of prevention of violent extremism, just simply talking about a class of peace education. Peace education. You tell children things about peace education, and in the process, you may induce some things, one or two, which are pointers to them, without telling them counter-terrorism. Some of these words are so big, it's like counter-insurgency, big words that children cannot digest. Yeah, they cannot digest. There are things that should be simple, and so on. For example, just in Sunday school, they will tell you, or in the madrasa, they teach children just simple things about good behavior and following teachings and so on. But those values, they add into so many other things in life that need not be pronounced the way we are doing. So, like NCTC now is talking about, for example, just talking to schools and university administrators simply how to take care of basic security issues, and they don't have to be blown there. Written security, counter-terrorism, and so on. Those are more technical, tactical issues that belong to specialized people, but we need also to find the same things and induce them into the population in more palatable ways, which may not then even be counterproductive in the end.
Right, thank you.
Just a small addition to that. I think what is emerging from this discussion is this is a good move. I don't think we should just condemn it and shelve it because it has good intentions. Yeah. But let's glean out of it what can be made good. And I disagree with the heading where there are some lines here which says, well, it's not going to be maths and science. People repeat all this. I don't think that education is all about maths and science. Education is to prepare one to be able to succeed in life. And there must be emotional support for students in school, spiritual support, and also intellectual support. And if you are going to have wholesome education, it must be approached in the manner in which we have been saying here, that prepare kids to be good citizens, that even in some of the teachings, you tell them how to be a good patriot of a country. That's right. How do you take care of your environment? How do you take care of your neighborhood? I mean, how do you relate to society? I mean, I get amazed. These days you find kids Even in my neighborhood, you find kids who are 15, 16 years, you tell them, you are destroying something there. Do you think this is right? Or you are litter? That's litter. You have to have this ingrained in our minds as we live citizens. When you see somebody eating a banana and drop it out of a matatu, I mean, or we glorify ill-gotten wealth which we clean. We are not teaching society to be responsible. So let's bring in wholesome education, and I think this is what I'm saying, in addition to localized situations like Turkana.
All right, thank you very much. All right, let's move on and we see also what really happened as far as the signing into bills is concerned. We have the Counter-terrorism Center, which has received new institutions as members in seeking to step up the war on terror. This follows President Uhuru Kenyatta signing into law the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2019, which includes the Prevention of Terrorism Act. The new members of the CTC are the National Police Service, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Kenya Wildlife Service, the Kenya Prisons Service, and the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. The center will also act as an approving and reporting institution for all civil society and international non-governmental organizations engaged in preventing and countering violent extremism and radicalization. On that good note as well, also remember today there is a high-powered level conference that will be happening at the UN complex. That is the African Regional High-Level Conference on Counter-terrorism and Prevention of Violent Extremism Conducive to Terrorism. That is happening at the UN Gigiri. We shall be also, of course, relaying that to you much later in the course of the day. And even some of our panelists will be in attendance this morning. But just to discuss that particular Prevention of Terrorism Act that has now, of course, come into play, and we know now various institutions will be working together as well. Let's just hear from Dr. Hassan Kanenje on this, because many of you as stakeholders also have been working largely to see this coming into effect. Tell us more about it, and another time also we'll be able to maybe tease it out completely, because I'm not really intimately familiar with it as it is right now.
Yeah, well, the National Counter-terrorism Center is responsible for coordinating a number of actually agencies and efforts, governmental, non-governmental, and even outside our own, government efforts in countering violent extremism and terrorism. It is, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding generally with regard to the work that NCTC does. Now, the addition of a number of, MFA, or rather other departments and agencies in government, it's because of the recognition of the interconnectedness of the role that they play. Because you cannot exactly be addressing terrorism without having aviation. You can't address terrorism without having immigration or foreign affairs. All these departments are connected. And I think it's just a culmination of efforts to make, to ensure that we have a united front and that the left hand knows actually what the right hand is doing most of the time. Now, with regard to the NCTC being responsible for approving organizations that are dealing in CVE, I think there's been a recognition that the CVE industry has almost become sometimes something like commerce, like a business to some people. And you have people registering organizations that are actually not even doing CVE work, but in the name of CVE. Or at least conducting programs that sometimes do not speak to the national strategy in countering violent extremism. And then as a country, we face unique peculiarities in the region. There are certain things we understand. In this region, and actually in much of Africa, we're one of the leading countries, especially in these efforts, in a very organized way. And I think what the government is trying to do is to make sure that all efforts are united and all hands are on deck, and we're not working at cross purposes, because there have been incidents where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, or perhaps MFA could be having a strategy that might not exactly be speaking to another agency, in a way that it's working seamlessly. Now, when it comes to the NGO or civil society world, there's a proliferation of CVEs, civil society organizations. And a lot of times when you look at some of the work, some that they do actually, it does not exactly speak to the objectives or the strategy that we are trying to implement as a country. Now, we know that also a lot of organizations funded also tend to be foreign with regard to doing some work, and sometimes foreign countries have their own interest in the country. Now, if you don't have a way of actually mainstreaming that and making sure you control it, you might lose the war altogether. And it's a war as a country, and as Kenya, we cannot afford to lose, because the Al-Shabaab and the extremist threat for Kenya is real, imminent, and it's current.
All right. Dr. Mumunzao?
Yes, Debarl, we've had we call it POTA, the Prevention of Terror Act, and all this. These mechanisms have been there, and institutions have been there, but within the broader policy framework within the United Nations and our sub-regional organizations, our RECs and so on, what is happening is that the entire discourse is moving from the hard military strategic approach to countering and preventing terrorism to the broader, rather softer, human security-oriented approach,
yes,
which is multifaceted and interconnected with so many actors. And so what Kenya is trying to do with the leadership of our dear head of state and the agencies and officers he has put in place, particularly NCTC under Ambassador Dr. Martin Kimani, a very good move to give these ministries, agencies, departments more operational latitude, to bring in more actors so that it is not a whole state-centric affair or core executive, if you like, internal security par excellence affair, but rather an affair that includes all other actors that were otherwise or earlier not seen to be part of the entire recipe. And therefore now you have important actors there to do with immigration, to do with the tax bodies, to do it, because if someone is planning a bad thing, sometimes they go through money laundering processes. They want to go through this kind of money transfer arrangements. They want to go through a very clandestine money laundering syndicates. And this then comes out now in terms of when the skill sets that terrorists have are at play, and it's a little too late when you have to bring in tacticians to deal with them. So with the whole idea is creating that broader operational environment, latitude in the context of legal, administrative, and the whole idea of means and ways, in order to ensure that we are not just looking in terms of the actual reaction that is counterterrorism proper, but the broader idea of prevention of violent extremism in line with the United Nations platform on prevention of terror, of terrorism and violent extremism.
All right.
Before in the earlier years, like a decade ago, people were looking at it in a very narrow way. Some people used to look at it from, just simple things about religion and all that. Now it's a whole broadened affair where all actors are on board, and we have been involved actively in shaping the entire agenda.
Okay, let's hear from Erastus Mwencha.
Thank you. I think I'll bring in a regional context to what my two colleagues have aptly analyzed. But before that, I thought Muma said something very important about the human security. And the human security has got three aspects. That is freedom from want, freedom from fear, and freedom from indignity. Now, those are the three aspects that you must look at in terms of human security. Now, and the regional angle that I want to bring in,
yes,
and which has been brought out, is how do we avoid silo systems? Because they create the problems. If you see what happened in Westgate and the rest, you could see a silo issue
yes,
cropping up. And the global architecture is even worse, because information sharing is a big problem among security agents.
yes.
And one of them, for instance, if you get United States, they will come here, they have all that information, but they will not share with you.
Yes.
And even within the region itself, I have been privileged to participate at meetings of, say, security agents within the region, where you find they don't want to talk to each other because they fear that in itself may be a source of insecurity.
Yes.
And information is power. So how do you create layers? I wish I could use a better technology than say like a blockchain technology that you can use so that you know which information you share to who at what time, so that that essential information is available. For instance, when he talks about money laundering or you know, all these religious kind of extremists, you must have the capacity to be able to have this information and use it in an anticipatory manner. But it all boils down to information sharing, but it also boils down to saying this architecture cannot be there for us. It is all of us in it together.
Right. Noami Damba.
Debarl, the war on terrorism, as we know it, is going to be won using intelligent network. And our friends here have outlined quite a number for the public. The term multifaceted is a very important term, Debarl, because when we talk about terrorism, we cannot just be thinking about Pokot or Wajir. We can't say there's never been one in Kisumu or in Kiambu. The people in Kiambu need to prepare and to anticipate at any time what will happen in the future. Debarl was so impressed in the street. We walk at 11:30 at night in Kigali, group of us, and everything is calm and you feel safe. And that's, nobody can go in the street in Kigali and act without some quiet person coming in and taking you away right away. And so they have intelligent network. They have layers and layers of intelligent network. That is the same thing in Israel. You know, the big guns our police are carrying, maybe for detection purposes and all that, but it's not serving the purpose. The purpose is intelligent. Where is it happening? And the ball is not going to happen when someone is shouting and everything. It's going to happen right now in a lab, in a cyber cafe, you know, where one single child, one single young man or woman with a really in-depth, intelligent, and artificial work can do so much damage. The point is, how did it start? What kind of environment is this child? Who is this person talking to? All that need to be unraveled very, very quickly for us to get to the root cause of what has happened.
All right, thank you. Right, we need to move on and also just read out some of the tweets that you are tweeting this morning. We have G. Kaikai Kolabusia saying that it's a good idea to have informers and spies within our institutions of learning. We're living in times of real immeasurable dangers of terrorism and radicalized youth as young as 13 years. Also, we have Jacob Abere Mtalala saying that KIC Amendment Bill 2019 isn't a solution approach to what is happening in schools and students. We need to look at primary level. Parents, guardians, neglect, plus no time watch mentality that has killed values. No need of spies in schools. This is what Jacob is saying. Also, we have M.N. Francis saying, Professor Wangari said nature is very unforgiving, and that is becoming a reality, of course, alluding to what we were discussing earlier, that is security and climate change, where we had also Sir David Attenborough saying that, yes, if we do not tame climate change, then this will lead to social unrest in the near future. We have also Samuel Kedi here saying he's watching from Busia. We appreciate you tuning in this morning from Busia, Samuel Bremwell Kedi. Also, Samuel Ruto is saying we made climate change by our own activities, but we need to change to bring change to our own change in climate change before our self-style change destroys our only habitable planet. Okay, play on words there with Samuel Ruto as far as climate change is concerned. Right, we continue with the discussion, and of course also one of the pivotal areas that we need to look at that has a potential risk as on security is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. African leaders launched a continental free trade zone on Sunday that, if successful, will unite 1.3 billion people, create a $3.4 trillion economic bloc, and usher in a new era of development. At an extraordinary summit in Niamey, Niger's capital, African leaders from the African Union used a hammer to launch 4 operational tools ratified by 27 countries to mark the start of the agreement following 4 years of talks. The agreement to form a 55-nation trade bloc was reached in March, paving the way for the summit where Ghana was announced as the host of a trade zone's future headquarters, and discussions were held on how exactly the bloc will operate. It is hoped that the African Continental Free Trade Area, the largest since the creation of the World Trade Organization in 1994, will help unlock Africa's long-stymied economic potential by boosting intra-regional trade, strengthening supply chains, and spreading expertise. Eritrea, the only African nation not to join, said the government supported the bloc and that it planned to hold talks with an AU delegation soon. Africa has much catching up to do. Its intra-regional trade accounted for just 17% of exports in 2017 versus 59% in the Asia and 69% in Europe. And Africa has missed out on economic booms that other trade blocs have experienced in recent decades. But of all this now also is a security aspect of this. We know what happened with the European, of course, zone with the Schengen agreement as well. This is just like what happened with the Schengen agreement, and they're grappling with the issue of, people just roaming freely because of, no visas at all, no barriers at all. And I think the person that can actually start off on this particular discussion is Ambassador Erastus Mwencha. Just tell us briefly about the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. Eritrea is not in it. Tanzania is still slow on the uptake. They're, casing the joint whether to join or not.
Debarl, the cup is not half empty. I would not focus on Eritrea, Tanzania having not signed, but I will just focus on the fact that the good news is this has been one of the most successful protocols of the African Union in terms of its passage. I was privileged to be associated with this. In fact, some of the people that we used that time to set up these blocks, like Mukisa Kitui, Kere Martin from Ghana, were those that helped put this thing together. And I'm so happy to see that it's finally now seen the light of day. And so let's not focus on those who are not in. Let's focus on what is happening. And I think the good news is Africa is now waking up to the fact that trade is really an engine of growth. Trade has never been seen as being a source of wealth, as a motor for transformation of society. And because we have been conditioned to believe that we can only produce certain goods which we don't consume to sell abroad and import things which we don't produce, and that mindset is settled in us. So this is also transformational. I think these are the key areas. You mentioned the statistics.
Yes.
One of the things I should mention here is that if you look at African Union with 55 countries, 54 having signed, that's a record, I can tell you for sure. And secondly, 27 have already signed it, ratified it. So having been associated with the establishment of a free trade area, COMESA, of 20 countries, there are countries which never joined. And they have not joined, like Ethiopia never joined. But you can see Ethiopia has joined this one, which is a good thing. And if you look at Kenya's trade today, Kenya trade, which originally was so much focused on Europe, has now turned its face to Africa. Over 50% of Kenya's exports is now to Africa, and to COMESA, which takes about 70% of Kenya's trade. And to me, it is opening an opportunity for us, first of all, to be able to industrialize, but also to bring efficiency to economies, because trade helps you to determine your weaknesses. It shows you the kind of products you can produce, efficiency at which you produce them, and use global standards to measure yourself so that you can then come to the table of global trading chain. And to me, this is a good thing. It will be built on what we are looking at, like East Africa Community, what is in COMESA, SADC. If we use this, and I saw the meeting taking place, using this as building blocks, Africa is going in the right direction. Of course, there are challenges. The challenges are going to be, as it has been pointed out, rules of origin. That the product you trade in must be produced in Africa. The danger is we can all be used as transshipment. Goods come from India, China, or wherever it is, Europe, stay in our place for a short time and export them as our goods. So we must detect that. We must then address the issues of borders. And this is where I want to address your question. You know, when you talk of trade, there are two things. There is trade in goods, there is trade in services. When you talk of trade in services involves, for instance, being an accountant, you can move across. Being a lawyer or education, like professor here admits students from Tanzania, from Uganda, wherever. If you are going to allow that, then you must allow free movement of people. Often at time, and I think this is the crux of which brings us here now to talk about trade, trade and security. Security is used as a cover to say, if you open borders, bad elements will move in. There are tools you can use that to control. This is all used as a gimmick. You have seen now the kind of xenophobia around the world. I mean, if you tell us the US economy is doing well, the British economy is doing well, then why are you moving out of the European Union? It has nothing to do with the trade issues. It has something else. The trade issue is xenophobia, where people are saying, we want to maintain the purity of our color or of our race, so we don't want these migrants to come so that they will change our character. So let's be careful how we are used to talk about the aspect of security. And it will be mentioned that if you allow a truck moving across, you know, or people moving to Tanzania to go and do business, they are also a security danger. It is, at the end of the day, a win-win and not a zero-sum game.
Thank you. Right. Well, for much of that particular developing story, you need to pick up the copy of East African to get all the details of this cautious optimism, I should say, as Africa unveils $3 trillion or dollars trading block. That is what is in this week's the East African. Right. We want also to just move on and see what is happening on the other side of the planet. We begin with Nigeria, where Nigeria's National Assembly was on lockdown on Tuesday after shots were fired outside during clashes between police and a group of Shiite Muslim protesters. Both sides blamed the other for the shooting. We had Abdullahi Mohammed Musa, a protester and member of Islamic Movement of Nigeria, telling reporters that police fired shots at protesters, killing a man in front of him after they peacefully tried to enter the assembly building. Also, he said tear gas was used against protesters. In a statement, police said 2 officers were shot and wounded in the legs, and 6 other officers were injured by individuals using clubs and stones. They said they had used minimum force to disperse the unruly protesters. IMN, a group that represents Nigeria's minority Shiite Muslim, has protested, I should say, regularly outside the National Assembly, calling for the release of their leader, Ibrahim Zakzaki, who has been in detention since 2015.
We moved to the National Assembly. On arrival at the National Assembly, the police officers there started shooting tear gas. They were shooting tear gas. Going back, we followed them till the next gate. We decided to stay at the next gate to wait for the members because they have already violated everything. At that junction, everything is calm. But a police officer from inside shoot tear gas and he shoots live ammunition. He shot one of us, he fell down and he died instantly.
And Germany's largest mosque was evacuated on Tuesday following a bomb threat sent via email, according to Cologne police. The central mosque in the western city of Cologne, which is run by the Turkish Muslim umbrella group DITB, was cordoned off after 50 people were taken to safety, according to a police spokesperson. The building was then searched and an 11:15 a.m. deadline mentioned in the threatening email had passed without incident. Police spokeswoman Anne-Marie Scholz told reporters outside. The operation was still ongoing by midday. Germany, a country of over 81 million people, has the second largest Muslim population in Western Europe after France. And Houthi military spokesman held a televised news conference to show the group's latest weapons technology against the Saudi-led coalition. The Houthis have stepped up their attacks on Saudi facilities over the past month, with frequent drone and missile attacks on airports, power plants and oil fields. The spokesman Yahya Saree said the group launched 30 successful attacks on Saudi sites over the past month as the group looks to inflict maximum damage on their northern neighbor. He added that the machinery being operated by the group was all locally made and in constant development by Yemenis mind, who he credited for the alleged attacks on Saudi Arabia.
واضح أمامكم الآن في الشاشة صاروخ قدس كروز المجنح، صاروخ محلي الصنع، كذلك بعيد المدى يصل إلى مديات بعيدة بفضل الله. الآن سنعرض لكم عمليتين إطلاق. العملية الأولى كانت على محطة التحلية ومحصابة أهدافها بدقة وقد أعلنا عنها سابقا. أما العملية الثانية فهي التي استهدفت مطار أبها الدولي والتي كذلك أصابت أهدافها بدقة بفضل الله.
And Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt, rivals to become the Britain's next Prime Minister, clashed over who could be most trusted on Brexit on Tuesday in a sometimes bad-natured television debate just 2 weeks before one takes the key to 10 Downing Street. With Johnson way out in front of the rest to replace Prime Minister Theresa May, both were asked repeatedly to prove that they will take Britain out of the European Union on October 31st and will protect business from a so-called no-deal Brexit, more than 3 years since Britain voted to leave the bloc. Let's listen in.
Very clearly before that it was leaving on October the 31st,
Which
do or die.
It is.
And I think it's do or die for the country, but not a Prime Minister who will put his own neck on the line. And that is not leadership.
Thank you very much indeed, Karen. Mr Hunt. Rules out a no-deal Brexit.
Sometimes things that you have to say to your friends that you'd rather not say, like I said to President Trump today, because I think his comments about...
Advice with the impartiality that they want.
Tenure if you become Prime Minister, Mr Hunt.
Maybe not a Prime Minister, though.
And the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cautioned Iran that it is within range of Israeli airstrikes, citing what he described as Iranian threats to destroy Israel. Netanyahu said that Iran should remember that Israel's warplanes can reach anywhere in the Middle East, including Iran, while visiting at an Israeli Air Force base where he viewed a squadron of advanced US-built F-3 or F-35 warplanes. Last week, a senior Iranian parliamentarian was quoted by the semi-official Mer news agency as saying that if the United States attacked Iran, Israel will be destroyed in half an hour. The United States Department or the United States State Department will continue to deal with UK ambassador until the White House advises otherwise, according to a spokesperson, Morgan Ortagus. On Monday, US President Donald Trump said he will not deal with Britain's ambassador to Washington after a leak of confidential memos in which the diplomat described the US president's administration as inept. Trump also attacked Britain's outgoing Prime Minister Theresa May, who had said her government had full confidence in Ambassador Kim Darroch, criticizing her handling of Brexit and saying she disregarded his advice. Take a listen.
Abajo, chicos, un poquito. Habla que vienen los tan así, vienen los chicos de atrás, por favor.
El presidente confiable.
I apologize for those wrong pictures, but of course also in the start of the Daily Nation today, this is what Donald Trump is all about as far as that diplomatic tiff is concerned, and this is what Victor has actually captured on that particular story. So we just ran you the wrong picture there. My apologies as well. But we can wrap up also on this particular story. Whereas US rapper Nicki Minaj has pulled out of a planned concert in Saudi Arabia next week, citing her support for rights of women and LGBTQ community. Minaj, known for her raunchy outfit and provocative stage performances, was due to headline the Jeddah World Fest Music Festival on July the 18th, but her plan to appear was criticized last week on social media. While I want nothing more than to bring my show to fans in Saudi Arabia after better educating myself on the issues, I believe it is important for me to make clear my support for the rights of women, the LGBTQ community, and freedom of expression, the Starship's singer said in a statement. The New York-based Human Rights Foundation last week urged Minaj to cancel her performance, saying her appearance will be at odds with the rapper's participation in festivities in New York marking Gay Pride Month in June. Homosexuality is banned in Saudi Arabia. Saudi officials last week said the Jeddah World Fest, or that is World Fest, will be the region's biggest ever live musical event. Other announced performances include former One Direction British singer Liam Payne and American DJ Steve Aoki.
Over the shoulder, Nikki! Christina, oh my God. Look at Christina. Shoulder! Nikki, on your right. Let's see the front of that dress. Miss Minaj! Nikki, over the shoulder!
I bet Dr. Momo Nzao has never seen Nicki Minaj. He's really shocked looking at him. This is the culture clash.
Social media, I think, this one's. I don't know these ones.
You don't know those ones?
Yeah.
Why are you shocking Momo, man?
Yeah, different.
We have to pick that reaction from Momo Nzao. Very organic, very raw. Anyway, just a tender reminder also of this particular high-level conference on counter-terrorism and the prevention of violent extremism conducive to terrorism. This is a conference that will be happening today at the United Nations here in Nairobi. We shall be having high delegates. Also, the President of the Republic of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, will be in attendance, and also the UN Secretary General, that is Antonio Guterres, will be also in attendance as well. We shall be following the developments of this particular high-level conference on counter-terrorism and the prevention of violent extremism conducive to terrorism. And of course, this follows doggedly the signing into law, that is Prevention of Terrorism Act that we were discussing about today as well. I want to thank our panelists this morning, Dr. Momo Nzao, Governance and Security Strategist. Thank you for coming through this morning. Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who is also the director at the Horn Institute. Thank you for coming through. Also, you'll be in attendance in this conference this morning. We shall be giving us also details of it maybe next Wednesday. Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, who is the chair of Africa Capacity Building Foundation and also the chair of Trademark East Africa. That is he was also the former deputy the chair of the African Union, thank you for coming through. And Professor Naomi Damba, who is the Vice Chancellor of KC University, an expert on foreign policy and defense. Thank you for coming through this morning. We appreciate also your contribution on today's Standing on Guard. I do apologize about that particular picture that you saw this morning, but of course you get the gist of the story. We shall give you the details of this much later or next week. Thank you for your valued company.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.